The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike, back with Sam. How you doing, Sam?
Hello, I'm doing very well. The people are getting all sorts of podcasts from us this week, which hopefully is exciting for them. And today we're doing a guest.
Yeah, that's right. It's been a while.
I wasn't sure if I
wanted
to make a concrete comparison here of our guest, but I think I'm not going to do that.
Do it.
What's the comparison here? Now we got to.
I don't know. I don't know. I didn't have a good one. I'm sorry. There's no good 3-man crew working the finals currently, at least as far as I know. So
yeah, we got Jamal Crawford. Who is it? Jamal Crawford, Reggie Miller, and who are they with? Mike Tirico.
Would our guest prefer to be compared to Jamal Crawford or Reggie Miller? If he had to be.
Oh God, I was kind of thinking, what's Bill's take? Stan Van Gundy's good in a 3-man booth, but not a 2-man booth.
The other way around, which I think is interesting. Okay, it's like maybe he just got better. But anyway, joining us is our friend all the way from Australia, international podcast today, David Nash. David, how are you?
We're back. I'm good, guys. I had a quick look. It was July 20 my time, I believe, last time we spoke, last off season, and I have done very little of discussing the Suns in a public forum. Yeah. Since then, we have our own private messages, which shall remain private. And I did hear you try and set Mike up last podcast, so don't even think about it, Sam. But I'm ready to go.
The walls have eyes. I should have expected that. I did want to set him up, and I'm actually really excited that now I get to argue with you about that directly. But the people have no idea what we're talking about, and we'll cross.
We'll see if he brings it up. Yeah,
we'll see. Cross that bridge when we come to it.
But yes, you do occasionally pop in on Twitter. A couple times a season now. For those who don't remember or maybe don't know, David used to have a podcast that was launched maybe just a few weeks before our podcast, which now at this point, David, was 8 years ago.
That's crazy.
Which is insane to say, yes. And we've developed a friendship over that time that remains to this day. In fact, David even visited here in Phoenix one time. So, and of course, you pop in. You have a unique perspective, I think, on the Suns because you're very good at looking at the cap tables and understanding that, but also you're very detailed when it comes to basketball. So I'm excited to talk to you about this. But because you sort of only pop in throughout the season occasionally on Twitter, we have yet to really have a general conversation of how you think the regular season, and I guess now including the playoffs, went. So where are you at when you think about last season now?
Yeah, it's funny hearing you say that. Like, I'm still watching just as much as I ever did, but not doing the podcast. And I probably had the realization this year for the first time that there's people in the kind of Twitter space and probably even in your Discord space that actually have no knowledge of what I did prior to being a nobody talking about the Suns on Twitter again. So that made me feel very old and realize how long ago I guess the four of us, including Max, actually started talking about the Suns, which is crazy to think, and crazy that you guys are still going because we wrapped it up quite a few years ago now. But I think to your question on the season, I had fun. I think I listened to you guys. I tried to stay connected. I certainly watched all the games as I always did. I've written down here, I think we all needed a palate cleanse after the last couple of seasons, and that's how I would kind of define this season. I said to both of you before we turn the mics on that, the further we get away from the last game of the season, I am a little worried that we might look back on the season as maybe a bit of a wasted opportunity in terms of, we're going to get into it, but there's, things from Gambo about Fleming paying 25 minutes a night next year. We didn't get a lot from Malawach, and we might discuss him a little bit when we revisit a conversation we had on the last pod. There was some things that I guess were sacrificed in exchange for having a positive season. And, I just look back on that and I've got this kind of nature versus nurture theory that I'm fascinated all the time with, how you build a contender. And it's, really hard right now to not view everything on the Booker timeline, as I guess you guys have and we did previously with when we first started talking about the Suns. And maybe that's a mistake, and maybe that's not something the Suns front office is doing, and they're just focused on building a competitive basketball team again. But for the short-term thrill of having a fun team to watch for again, I do think that there's some risks in sort of what was sacrificed this year to get there. And I'm thinking, as I guess a bit of a segue into the rest of the 60 to 90 minutes we might spend here, we might find out a little bit more about those risks this off season going into next season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is tough, right? In thinking about the season and how it went, because obviously none of the three of us, and broadly speaking, nobody in the Suns community had massive expectations for them in terms of being able to win games this year. And so once they did, as much as that was its own sort of like dopamine rush in the first half of the season, when the expectations shifted in the back half of the season, Mike and I actually just talked about yesterday on a Patreon episode, like the Coach of the Year results that just came back, and Jordan Ott finishing 5th, and Charles Lee of the Hornets finishing 4th. And Mike made the point of like, it feels like a lot of that was reflected in the momentum of the regular season, the fact that the Suns had a really good first half, and then once the expectations shifted halfway through and they had to like beat good teams and playoff teams, that became at a certain point really challenging for them, even though they were trying as hard as they could to do that by playing veteran players. Meanwhile, you had a team like the Hornets that started off terrible and then had an amazing second half, and so that's why Charles Lee finishes higher in a race like that than Jordan Ott, because that's an expectation-based award. But then you go into the playoffs too, and as fun as it was to be in the playoffs, and I do think that there's definitely a lot to take from it. Well, that's sort of the thing, right? You get swept, and so
what was fun? What part of it was fun to you?
Being there. I don't know. Sometimes you just want to be included.
Just that people can't say we missed the playoffs.
Yeah, it's
I guess
always
when
better.
you're in the play-in
here's the
tournament,
thing.
it's better to make it than not. But it
So
wasn't fun.
I'm continually reminding myself, because I don't share this sentiment that I've seen from some Suns fans online, that the way the season ended significantly took away from the idea that this season was a success. I don't think I believe that. But, David, like, to what extent have you kind of felt that, or do you sympathize with that point of view, right? That's sort of like, is there any part of you that's soured on the 2025-2026 Suns based on kind of just how the last 2 months went down?
No, I don't think I've soured on the on-court performance at all. I think they did a good job. I tried to chime in when I could on, how the injuries and just the lack of talent that the roster started the season with, and they were really eking the most out of that talent. And then when some injuries hit, that just kind of particularly made Jordan Ott's job really, really tough. And, I saw him particularly cop a lot of criticism towards the back half of the year and into the playoffs. And, a lot of comments about his overall philosophy, which I kind of disagreed with. At the end of the day, coaches play talent. I think good coaches adjust their overall philosophy based on the talent that they have. And particularly right towards the very end, when you're playing, an absolute juggernaut in the Thunder in the playoffs, he just was at a huge talent deficit. So I don't put too much into that. We also see it every round that goes by in the playoffs. I think this is something that really hampered the discussion about the previous Suns playoff teams. Is every round you go through, certain guys drop out of the rotation or get shown to have a huge weakness that the opposition can exploit, and it does sour or change people's opinions versus the the 82 games of the regular season that they looked in. And it's no secret that guys make and lose money sometimes based on those results of the postseason. So maybe a couple of guys lost a bit of money towards the end of the regular season. I would say someone like Colin Gillespie maybe was saved by the Suns not going further along in the playoffs in terms of the type of money that he might get this offseason. But all in all, I think my opinions of the basketball don't really change. It's just, what they could have done this season to set them up for I guess, future success. And, I'm not going to pretend that I'm right on this. It's really something that I'm fascinated with as we talk about this offseason, because, I see a lot of talking online about what the Suns could do this offseason. I think my opinions are often baked in kind of, looking for us to take another big step forward because of that Booker timeline, but also being realistic about what assets and what avenues the Suns actually have. And I think we can live in a fantasy world where we pretend that we're going to get Giannis or, make these big swings that we simply don't have the assets to compete with, or we can have our opinions be a little bit further baked in what's actually realistic. And I always find that interesting when I read reactions to when I come and join you guys on the pod, etc. Some of the options that I throw out there and that I might throw out there today, they're not necessarily my first choice or my favorite, but I'm trying to read the tea leaves a little bit and predict what is actually realistic versus some fantasy land of us jumping all the way up to competing with the the Spurs and the Thunder as early as next season.
We have, in some sense, we get sort of clues. The Suns aren't going to step out there and tell us what they're going to do, although they did last year. Just sort of step out and tell us exactly what they're going to do, which is trade Kevin Durant, waive Bradley Beal.
Yep.
But we have like these avenues to pick up on these clues that what they're going to do, and then we try to put that together as we go. And it's like one of our favorite topics on this podcast is trying to decipher that in some ways. We have Gambo and the things that he says.
Yep.
And we have the math, which you're very good at. That's something Sam and I have always struggled with. But the other thing we have is what they say. How did you feel about what I described on this podcast as a self-congratulatory post-season press conference by Matt Ishbia and Brian Gregory, where I read it as, and maybe other people didn't, and honestly I feel like most people just didn't watch it all. I read it as they thought this season was sort of a resounding success, and not just a success in the way that it was like we won more games than we lost, but also see I told you so type of success, where they were sort of rubbing it in the faces of any sort of fans or media members that did not believe in them.
Yep.
Did you read it that way? Because I know you like to watch stuff like that as well, as Sam and I do. And also, do you think that gives any hint as to what they think about the future of this team?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I try and use what they say, what they leak to people like Gambo, the math, to try and predict things. That's what I find fun. We mentioned the pod earlier. I did that a lot on the pod with Max, but I also did the newsletter post that as well, and had not 100% success rate, but was able to predict some things, kind of looking at all of those things and trying to read the tea leaves a little bit. It's interesting here you say they told us what they were going to do last offseason and they did it, which I think
they even did after the 49 win season too. I mentioned it, like they were really excited about 49 wins, even though we were upset, and then they just basically signed Tyus Jones and called it a night. But yeah.
Yep. And this kind of new regime, I guess, with the change of James Jones in particular, I kind of feel like it's still too early to notice a trend in like who they are. Like they definitely did that last season, and as you said, did that in the 49 season, a win season a little bit. But I'm like, is that an outlier? Can we basically take them at face value going forward? Does that change how I start to think about things and read the tea leaves? Do I just take everything they say instead of still believing that maybe they're playing ducks and drakes a little bit in terms of what they're putting out there in the media? But you're right. They have been upfront. Sometimes, in my opinion, too much. Whether it's in sort of how they tank the value of the assets that they do have in terms of like showing their hand too early, or more in what you were talking about in just like celebrating not mediocrity, but celebrating being able to tell people they were wrong about the Suns, which personally. Not really my attitude or how I would approach something if I worked in a front office or owned a team. But when you're worth billions of dollars and you own a team, you can kind of do whatever the hell you want. And certainly with what's the Trailblazers' new owner,
Tom Dundon.
Tom Dundon, or the what's the nickname that Bill's given him or someone gave him?
Oh, I don't even know.
Crap!
It's probably
I don't
like
remember.
Cheapskate Tom
Yeah,
or something.
Cheapo something.
El
Tom.
Cheapo.
El
There you
Cheapo,
go.
that's what
Yeah.
it
There
is.
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that certainly makes me appreciate the owner that we've got, and maybe you just have to take some of the negatives or the hyperbole to kind of counteract that. But to your question and to your point, I do think celebrating it as a milestone, we can kind of rest on our laurels here would be, a bad thing, but I don't take it that way. I like I mentioned earlier, the kind of nature versus nurture thing. We're still early, but I would guess if you ask them, their opinion is you build a good culture, you win, and stuff like worrying about Fleming's development, Malawatch's development, that all kind of will take care of itself. And, that's not too dissimilar to how it was under James Jones. Kids and rookies weren't gifted minutes. Guys still did develop. And, I've kind of sat back listening to the two of you guys talk about it throughout the year as well, because I know you're on slightly different planes in terms of how you get that development. And I don't necessarily have a strong opinion, but I would say that it seems like this regime tends to believe, you build it and the rest will kind of take care of itself.
I've been tempted to make so many baseball references already in this episode, but I don't know if that's appropriate with an
Can
Australian.
I just say, what was the game that you said? Ducks and
Drakes? No idea what that is.
I looked it up. It's skipping rocks, skipping stones, Sam, as we call it in the United States. Apparently,
What?
that's what they. Yeah,
That's what you call that?
I don't personally. I would never use that.
it's actually a British thing, according to the.
I would
Google.
only ever
Wow.
use it in the context that I used it of, like, playing tricks or trying to be tricky with what you say.
Yeah.
But
It
Try to
just
be
makes you
cheeky.
sound smarter than just saying playing games. By the way,
I
But
mean,
anyway.
they certainly on that point, right? Ishbia, I am very much appreciative or appreciating an owner who, unlike Tom Dundon or whatever, likes to spend and likes basketball. That's the most important thing. I can tell he likes basketball. I do think there is that trend now that we're 3 years in of just he likes to make public appearances and he likes to talk and maybe he is playing ducks and drakes a little bit with some of it, and that's the idea. But honestly, I think kind of a lot of it is surprisingly what's the word I want to use? I think there's a decent amount that you can read into just what he says by taking it at face value. He just has an opposite approach to James Jones, who was always completely against sort of playing the media game and kind of wanted to say as little as possible.
it really fascinates me about being a fly on the wall in those, James Jones, still the GM, Matt Ishbia, the owner conversations, because they clearly had different attitudes of how to talk to the media and, how to interact publicly with what the team's doing. And I find myself sometimes fascinated with how those conversations went, and I guess no surprise that things ended up the way they did, given those differing opinions on how to do things.
So I do want to talk about, because you brought up the idea of culture, and Matt Ishbia and Brian Gregory and Bartelstein, and they'll all talk about culture, and they say that we're trying to build a sustainable culture, and if you do that, the success will come. To some extent, it's a platitude. To some extent, I think it's true, right?
Yep.
How far do you think the Suns have actually come on that goal in the past 12 months? How much of that do you attribute to Jordan Ott? How do you feel about Devin Booker at this point in his career as it relates to that? And kind of anything else you want to talk about. But in terms of that goal of culture, where do you think the Suns stand, if that's their stated goal?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. I guess you guys know I've been somewhat of a James Jones defender, or at least someone who's wanted to kind of highlight the amount of success that old regime did have. And I find it weird when the current regime talks about culture, because the culture of the Suns before Matt Ishbia bought the team, and if we can, as much as possible, put aside the previous owner and what he brought towards the culture, I would argue the culture was really fucking good. And it led them to overachieve, if anything, and make the finals. And yes, they fell short, but God, there was a lot of fun basketball and a lot to be proud of with that team. Without getting myself in trouble here, the current regime kind of undid all of that with the decisions that were made. And I guess, because of that mix of James Jones was still part of the team and Matt Ishbia was the owner, you can kind of pick whichever side you want to blame for certain transactions, and we'll never know the truth on that. Only maybe a few people will. But they're kind of undoing or rejuvenating the culture from what they did themselves. And, I guess the honesty that I do like is when Matt Ishbia at least owns that a little bit and owns the mistakes that he made early on, even if he doesn't, take full ownership of maybe some of the transactions that led to that. But, I think that's what I think about Sam the most is we can pat ourselves on the back for rejuvenating things. And as I said, bit of a palate cleanse. It was fun watching this team again. They actually gave a shit again. But let's not kind of look past the fact that it was, just calling it for what it is. It was the Kevin Durant trade and the Bradley Beal transaction and a few other things around that created this bad culture that they so desperately are saying they needed to undo. And it was the same people in charge.
We've all been there. You're away for the weekend, the big game is on, and you realize you're restricted from watching. Or maybe you're trying to check the latest lines on your betting app, but your local network is blocking the site. These are the ultimate unforced errors. You can prevent this from happening to you with IPVanish. IPVanish is the powerhouse VPN designed to keep you in the game no matter where you are. IPVanish helps you stay connected to your favorite team and streaming services while you travel. But it's not just about watching the game. For the bettors out there, IPVanish provides an extra layer of security and privacy that helps you access your account safely on public Wi-Fi. Plus, IPVanish is lightning fast, so you won't have to worry about lag during those crucial live betting moments. Right now, get a massive discount at IPVanish.com. That's IPVanish.com to get started today. Secure your play and go to IPVanish.com.
Big thanks to our sponsor, BetterHelp, for partnering with us for this important conversation about mental health.
This is Steve Smith here, former NFL wide receiver and host of the 89 show on YouTube. So having a counselor and working with BetterHelp, that gives you an opportunity to really start to unpack. But people don't understand, when you unpack things, you also open up a box that you're not always sure what's inside. So I think that's why seeing a professional is extremely important. If you need someone to open up to, visit BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/89 to get started.
If you care about coffee and how it's made, check out Alchemy Roast. They roast in small batches and source their beans responsibly, focusing on flavor instead of mass production. The result is coffee that's balanced, well-developed, and easy to drink, whether you brew at home every day or just want something better than grocery store coffee. You can order online at alchemyroaster.com, and if you use the promo code TIMELINE at checkout, you'll get 10% off your order. Go now to alchemyroaster.com, my favorite coffee, and use the promo code TIMELINE at checkout. Get 10% off, support a local Phoenix business, and get the best coffee you can buy. Something in the news right now that we just talked about on our Patreon podcast, so we haven't brought this onto the main feed. Lottery reform. We're changing how the picks are given to these teams based on their record.
Actually, the next 2 hours of the podcast will be on just this topic.
Yeah, actually, I'm really looking forward to tanking. Yeah. How has that impacted your thoughts about team building in the future, if at all? Because I do think looking at the Suns pick situation is different now. And even just how you value swaps, I feel like they're even more valuable than they've ever been before. Has that impacted how you think about this team? Or maybe, like Sam talked about, how it changed his evaluation of who Matt Ishbia is as an owner, because sometimes being mediocre could actually be beneficial now. Yep. And there is a path where he's just building mediocre teams for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Sam. I listened to your pod, your bonus pod, just before getting ready for this one. And my first big takeaway when I'm reading the kind of, headlines of the lottery reform is like, God, this suits a Matt Ishbia owned Suns team. Yes, we don't have a lot of assets right now, and yes, it's going to take a bit of time to replenish a lot of what we've undone, but the changes, for as long as they hang around, and I know that they, are saying that they're essentially temporary changes that they'll revisit again based on how successful they are. But it's not going to reward tanking teams, which Matt Ishbia has been very clear he's not interested in doing. And you can, pre these changes, have your view of whether that's a good thing to do as an owner or not. But it's going to reward teams that try and win and try and compete. And, I think given what this regime has said about the Suns, with my son's pure Suns hat on, I'm a fan of the changes. You can have a comment on the changes overall and whether it is actually fair for teams that are going to be really struggling or lack talent. And I think I'd probably sit on the other side of the fence in general on that. But with my pure Suns hat on, I think it's a good thing for the future of this team, given what we've heard the last 3 or so seasons about how these teams are going to run themselves.
I will say
the social safety net is dead in the NBA. Rugged individualism is here. If you are in the bottom 3, get good. The NBA is just telling you to get good.
I think this lottery reform has guaranteed that one of these swaps that the Suns have, the Suns will win the lottery and another team will get the number 1 overall pick. I feel like it basically guarantees that's going to happen before these swaps run out. That's just going to happen, and we're just going to have to suffer with that. But, it is what it is.
You know what we didn't talk about on that episode David's referring to yesterday also, which just kind of feels like a big deal to me. Like, not many people are talking about it. They're snake drafting now in the second round.
It's crazy.
Isn't that wild?
It's really weird.
For those who aren't really following, like just in 5 seconds, basically all it means is that if you're a bottom 3 team in the first round, you have worse odds than teams number 4 through 10. And that's really all you need to know is the odds are kind of flattened.
It's the drunk bar pitch, as we called it.
That's the drunk bar pitch. But in addition to that, they're snake drafting now. So like right now, if you're this the 14th team in terms of odds and you don't move up, you just stay where you are, you're one of the play-in teams and you're the 14th worst team in the NBA, everyone knows if you didn't trade your picks, which basically everyone has at this point a million times, you're going to take 14th in the first round and 44th in the second round. And now they're reversing that in the second round. So if you're in the lottery, if you're one of these now 16 teams in the lottery, and let's say you get 14th, again, you're one of those play-in teams. Now, instead of drafting 44th in the second round, you get 33rd because they flip the order. To make that easier, if you're 16th in the lottery, the last team in the lottery, you will pick first in the second round. So you could be a play-in team. Maybe this is partially to address, Mike, this idea that like teams will get into the play-in game and then tank the game because they'll have a 6% chance at the first pick or whatever. Yeah. Because now if that happens, sure, they get the first pick, but also their second round pick value goes to crap. Whereas now it's like if you lose a play-in game, you're gonna have the 15th-ish pick and you're gonna have like the 32nd-ish pick. And honestly, that's really good value for those teams in the middle, which doesn't
drop
kind of
that
surprising
much though,
to me.
when you
Especially,
drop out of that. Yeah,
so much of David, what I've talked about on that episode is like not just what the tanking reform does in a vacuum, but what it does in conjunction with this new CBA.
Yeah.
And like the ability for contending teams to continually add fresh, young, cheap talent to the end of their rosters to kind of give themselves a chance to keep competing in the playoffs. The types of guys you're able to draft like 31st overall, but very rarely draft 45th overall is what's so interesting to me. That,
and I think
they're giving those teams a more chances at that.
A great live example of this is I wanted to talk about the Mark Williams trade at some point because I've kind of fluctuated my own opinion on that, and I had to revisit what the actual cost of that trade was. And we got our own 29 second back in that deal from Charlotte, which I think they had previously through one of the 48 other trades we made with the Charlotte Hornets over the last few years. And we gave up pick 29 in last year's draft that I think was Liam McNeely. But we also gave back what I would consider a 2029 bad first. It's one of those ones that Mike was talking about that has turned out to be the least favorable of, after 3 different teams all get the other picks, then Charlotte gets the last one. So if you fast forward to 2029 and, we believe this team's going to keep trying to be good, not that you just trying to be good definitely guarantees that you will be good, but our own 22nd could be at the start of the second round if we're up in the playoffs still in 2029, and Charlotte might get the least favorable 2029 first, which, after everything is said and done, let's say that ends up in, the bottom 5, because despite the lottery changes, it's after the lottery that the least favorable kind of kicks in. So they can't get lucky with that necessarily. And there might not be much difference between those 2 picks, for instance, which changes my opinion on the Mark Williams trade when I look at things. So, I think pre these changes, I probably, looking back at the cost, already felt like it was a worthwhile risk to take, even though we'll get into it a bit later. I think maybe they should just let Mark Williams go. But cost overall with these changes could look even better in a couple of years' time when that draft comes along. So, yeah, that's just an interesting way to look at these very recent changes through a Suns live example of how it might impact things.
Let's switch over to the offseason.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
In some ways, this is like our actual offseason preview, which we haven't really done. We've just sort of been flirting with the offseason for a few weeks now. But let's start here. And actually, maybe, Sam, this is a question for you too, but when you think about the Suns this offseason, what's the top thing that comes out that they need to address? What's the
one word?
What's the thing? You don't have to do one word, but what's the first thing that comes to mind when, I think a lot of Suns fans hearing this will say size right away. And like I understand the size thing, and I understand it. I do understand the size thing, but I think they have bigger, personally,
sexy.
I think they have bigger problems they need to address.
I think they need to be sexy.
They need more aura. Yeah. What do you think, David?
Can I have 2 words?
Sure. Oh,
yes.
No, you don't
I'm
have
just
to
joking.
do one word. Don't listen to Sam. It's just in
Don't
general.
listen to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to, and I'm doing the Charles Barkley thing here. What did he do? Like, I've got 2 words for you, and then said Chris Paul versus Steve Nash.
Chris Paul
on
Steve
TNT.
Nash, primetime TV. It's like, that's Chuck, that's 7 words or whatever. Yeah.
I just want to rewind back to July 20, last time we spoke. It's second star. And I'm not saying they have to get the second star this offseason, but it's the same conversation that we had. I need to see that we're closer to getting that second star through, one almost guaranteed avenue or multiple possible avenues to get there. And I guess that's going back to my thoughts about the season overall and whether we'll look back with it being a wasted opportunity. Right now, I don't feel any closer than what we did almost a year ago when we discussed that. And they need that to change this offseason with
you have
moves.
those options, right, from our conversation last year. Almost exactly a year ago in July, David came on our pod and talked about the importance of getting a second star next to Devin Booker.
And the avenues as well.
And the avenues, do you want to just go through those and
so there was
talk about what's likely?
There was 6 groups, and I'll let you guys tell me if, as I go through, whether you would, pull someone out of that group or whether you would change that group in, where they sit entirely. But going from least to most likely, the 6th group was draft picks. And I think it still remains the same. I don't see, unless you want to look, 5-6 years out and, maybe with lottery reform, we get lucky with a pick that we actually own that we haven't gone on and traded. But draft picks was the least likely avenue to getting a second star, and I would say that still remains the same.
And by that, you mean just picking a star with a pick that we own?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
It means future picks, not anyone who's currently on the roster.
Yes,
importantly too.
I do think that like star trades are not going to have 5-6 picks in them anymore.
No.
They are going to have maybe 2, and the Suns
the value
maybe
has
have
been
2,
decimated, I would argue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That's a good point, and maybe that will bring it up over these next couple of groups that are pretty sad, to be honest.
It's in a trade though now, right? Because that's what that would mean. Like if you're trading for, I don't know, Anthony Davis, or I guess even Giannis. Like how many picks are going to be in a Giannis trade? It's not going to be 5. It might be 3.
I hadn't, to be honest, when we talked about this, it was these things themselves as assets or in trades to get a second star. So when you consider that, which I certainly hadn't, I think we might get to the end here and draft picks might be, that it might jump up a few spots here in the order, because, particularly when I tell you these next couple of groups. So group 5 was done. Oso, Fleming, and Kobe Brea, basically just saying, the chances of any of those guys either turning into a second star themselves or being a, more than just a throw-in in a star piece trade, I think, is fairly low and probably the lowest now when we just discussed, future draft picks.
Hold on, let's pause there for a second too. I'm sorry. I can already tell I'm gonna make you take forever to get through this list.
That's okay.
Fleming.
Yep.
We have not mentioned his name as far as your evaluation of him. Now, Gambo said they expect the Suns to be playing him 25 minutes a game.
Crazy.
The Suns have consistently throughout the season said this guy does not know how good he can be.
Yeah.
Addressing sort of confidence with him, but also like the concept of what his ceiling could potentially be. There's a case to be made that the Suns believe he could potentially be a star. I don't see that with him as far as the overall ceiling of how he plays. What do you see when you watch him?
Could we cheat and maybe say star role player?
Yeah, I think that's his ceiling. I think that's. I think he has the floor of being a pretty good role player, like a Torrey Craig, if you will.
I think everyone kind of understood that when he was drafted.
Yeah, but I do think there's some Suns fans, and this happens with everyone the Suns pick, so, fair is fair on that, but there's some fans and maybe even people in the organization that think his ceiling is a little bit higher, and maybe they're right. Maybe there's things happening in practice or behind the scenes that we haven't seen yet.
Are you telling me you're a little bit skeptical that just because maybe he looks a little bit like Kawhi Leonard that he's not actually Kawhi Leonard, Mike?
I don't know that there is a wing who is not a great scorer that isn't compared to Kawhi Leonard in their rookie year by the fan base of that team.
Oh, I mean, death taxes and everyone picking, cherry picking Kawhi Leonard's very low first couple of season numbers to make a comparison to the rookie that they love.
I think in general, though, I am lower on Suns rookies than everyone.
Yep.
And that just happens with me and I've realized that usually I end up being right because that's just how most players end up. Very few of them end up being stars. So I just don't see it. I was always high on Devin Booker. I don't know if that means anything, but I was always high on him compared to other guys once he was in the NBA at the very least. And these other guys, I just don't quite see it with yet. Like maybe Jaden McDaniels is like the level that Fleming could reach if everything goes right. Yep. And that's still a really great player, but it's not quite a star.
Right, and
exactly.
That sort of player, we brought up OG Anunoby's name, like Jaden McDaniels, those are guys who didn't really have any sort of in-between offensive game for 4 years, right? We're talking about the very end of their rookie contract where they developed it. So even then, you're talking about a long time. You're talking about Devin Booker being significantly older by the time that a guy like Rasheer Fleming could be a star, because he's just he could be a good player. He's just not going to be a star next year.
Exactly, and that's a great point, because like I said at the very beginning, my opinions or how we talk about these things are very much through the lens of that Devin Booker timeline. Right. And coming back to this topic in particular, I don't think him being the second star or being a main piece in a trade for a second star is an outcome that we can say is overly high right now, as much as I do love him as a player, and I hope he gets more minutes, maybe not quite 25 a game next season, but I definitely hope he's someone that we're watching quite a lot next season. So that moves us to the next tier, which I guess is tier 4. Remember Nick Richards?
Yeah.
So he it was probably too good of me to throw him in this tier with Grayson
He's a free
Allen.
agent again. If we get to a free agent conversation at some point today, you know, maybe there's your second star. Bring him back.
So Nick Richards, Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, and a really interesting name that I threw in before he'd played a minute for the Suns was Dylan Brooks. And the conversation we had about this tier was more, you know, an aggregation trade rather than turning into the second star. But the interesting thing is, I guess you would argue, looking at the last season we just had, Dylan Brooks, you know, was the Suns' second best player.
Yep.
And was, you know, I guess on the fringe of a conversation around an all-star nod, just, you know, particularly halfway through the year when he was hot and, you know, there was maybe some other options or some openings at the back end of the all-star game with injuries and things. But that was the group 4. Any comments on that?
You know, I can't believe I never pulled like a definitive list in Suns history of players who in their inaugural Suns season averaged 20 points per game. Because it can't be that big of a list, and Dylan Brooks is on that list.
Yeah.
He's not a star, right? He obviously doesn't feel like a
He
star.
can't pass. Like
20
you can't
points per
have
game.
a star who can't pass.
And 20 points per game in 2026 is 14 points per game in 1994.
Yeah,
so
it's basically
not
Jared Dudley's 2012 season.
Yeah. That feels a little disrespectful because Jared Dudley was not ISOing
and he averaged
on
like
guys.
13 or 14. Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah.
I think
but sure, I know what you mean.
I want to
will-
know
you
what
go,
you
Mike,
thought.
go.
I just want to know what you thought of Dylan Brooks, David, because I don't think we've ever talked about him really.
No, I guess, yeah, not talking about him until last offseason before he'd even played a game.
Yeah.
How do I answer this question?
Can I just say I loved him this year and I was a huge fan, and I feel like I'm almost like further on the side of liking him than many Suns fans are.
Yep. I've noticed one of the many differences between you and Sam in those conversations.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the Dylan Brooks experience overall. We might get to it when we talk about another player on this roster. I don't think Dylan Brooks can coexist on the roster as it is presently constructed.
Yeah,
and
that's
I think
clear. Yeah.
They need to do a better job of, and to be clear, I think he is, you know, clearly above some of the others in terms of you definitely keep him around versus keeping some of the others around and build around it. But you know, you noted his big weakness of a lack of passing, and that I think pushes another guy out the door for me when we look at both the math of the off season and just looking back at the season overall. So we can definitely talk about that. The only other thing I note with this group is Sam, you joked a whole year ago about an aggregation trade being for Zion Williamson, and here we are again.
Hell yeah. Time is a flat circle, and
And,
you know, he's
and
not,
Zion's a big fat circle.
and Zion is a big fat circle. That's great. You know, what do you think about that, David? The idea of kind of making a trade for a supermassive black hole of sorts. Because I really think there's something there. But you know, you can tell me I'm crazy and I wouldn't mind.
I don't think you're crazy. I think one of the things that I have chimed in quite a lot with this season when I've, you know, been online talking about the Suns is because, again, of this lens that I look at the team through, because of the lack of assets, because of the ambition to compete on Devin Booker's timeline, one of the big kind of, I guess, results of that is this team is going to have to continue to take risks. I would classify taking Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green back for Kevin Durant as a risk. I would classify taking Kaman Malawach at number 10 instead of maybe some safer picks in last year's draft as a risk.
Yep.
I would take trading up for Rasheer Fleming at the start of the second round as somewhat of a risk given the assets that it took to do that. This team, because of past mistakes, is having to take all of these risks, and I would very much put the very large Zion Williamson into the very large hole of taking another risk that, you know, might pay off, costs less than other less risky options. And that's the kind of transaction that this team at least for the next couple of seasons, is going to have to continue to do. And not even the best front office is going to have 100% success rate on all of those risks. So I don't love it. I don't hate it, but I think it's more of a comment on what is a realistic style transaction that the Suns are going to have to make.
Right.
And that's the world that I live in. And when I talk about the Suns, I try and communicate out there is I would much prefer our fan base live in the reality of what we're dealing with here rather than, fantasy land.
That is how I've always tried to communicate it to the fan base too. Not that Zion Williamson is anywhere near one of my favorite players in the NBA. It was just, can you take a risk on a distressed asset? That idea I've just been toying around with for months. And also let it be known that there is not a 1-to-1 proportion between body weight and the size of the risk, because Ja Morant is 155 pounds soaking wet, and he would be just as much, if not more of a risk than Zion, and is in that conversation too.
Should we move on to group 3?
Yes.
Do it.
Very easy one. Jalen Green and Mark Williams. And a big fat nope would be my comment on that group in terms of them turning into the second star. With, I guess, an asterisk of everyone looks at least at that Jalen Green salary slot as being a main piece in a trade for somebody else. And I don't necessarily think he did his overall value any harm this season, particularly given the size of and length of his contract. It's not, I wouldn't consider it like a super negative asset, but I think it's really just playing a salary role in a trade. I don't think it's really playing any sort of positive value to the team that's taking him on.
With respect, Mike, I'm going to butt in because I know what you think about Jalen Green.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do have things I want to shift it to, but yeah, go ahead.
No, I know, but I want to jump in and ask David, maybe in a way where has that changed for you throughout the, because Jalen didn't have much of an inaugural season with the Suns. He only played 32 games. But I guess I'm curious, did it go from a year ago when they made the trade in the first place and they were kind of just taking back what they could get, did it go, your evaluation of him, from this guy probably has no chance of being that second star, but, maybe if you squint, it could happen, to now just like absolutely not, there is no chance? Or has your evaluation kind of not changed in the past 12 months of who he is?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say it changed. I was willing to, I think we even spoke about it on the last off-season pod, I was willing to kind of see it with my own eyes and give him a chance. About as hot a take as you'll get out of me for this off-season is both math when we have a look at it and what I saw, even though, yes, I'm willing to admit he was injured for a lot of the season and didn't maybe get a full fair shake at it. Jalen Green's got to go. That's about as hot a take as you'll get out of me for a Suns off season.
I think that's to give you some respect there. Like, I think that really is a hot take in this fan base, in the sense that maybe a lot of people do feel that way, but to just be vociferous and saying it is important, I think, if that's the way you feel, because I haven't seen that from a lot of people.
I guess my worry is, if going back to your question with overall value, if the rest of the league sees that as well, it might be harder to include him in a trade that makes sense for the Suns to get better. But I just don't think we can have another year of him in this placeholder spot.
Yeah,
I alluded to it before. The soft answer is probably that you can't have Devin Booker, Jalen Green, and Dylan Brooks together.
It's clear.
Whereas the hard answer is Brooks showed a hell of a lot more, has a lot of off-court, positivity around, is cheaper,
he's a better player,
and he's a better player.
He's just better at basketball, however you want to determine it.
Yeah, and therefore I just have to say I've seen enough with Jalen Green.
Okay,
I don't think he can play the way Jordan Ott wants for this team to play long term. I think he's too small next to Devin Booker.
Okay,
I was willing to give it a chance, but I just can't do it. And watching the Knicks, and I've heard you guys talk about it in the last few weeks. Can we get one Brunson type build around Devin Booker before it's too late?
Interesting.
Can we just do that once, guys, please?
What do you mean? That his name is Colin Gillespie next season when he takes another leap.
Yeah, Jamari Bouye. Okay, so I'm glad we got there.
Wait, real quick, David. Colin Gillespie was not in any of these 6 tiers, right?
Yeah, right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which
Maybe
I want us to try and
maybe he should be, as an aside.
have a new order, and maybe I'll just mention it quickly because I don't think we need to spend too much time on the last 2 groups. The second group, Mike, before you dive into what you wanted to talk about, was free agency and looking, many years ahead at that possibly being a way to kind of open up space for a second star. And then Kamal Malawach was number 1, either him being the second star, which I don't think we saw much this season to kind of push us in either direction, or being, the centerpiece of a trade for a second star. So, I think order-wise, Brooks probably elevates that group that he was in. Green and Williams maybe drop. And to your very first point, Mike, maybe draft picks, skyrockets all the way up to, the number 1 or 2 group going forward because of lottery reform.
And we have an owner willing to trade them,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, interesting to kind of look back on that conversation. I don't think we're any closer to knowing which group is kind of going to get us there, but, maybe a few chops and changes in the order as I had it last season.
I've 3 things that this brought up that I want to mention. Well, I mean, okay, yeah. 1, Gambo did not mention Jalen Green. In all of his talk about what the Suns are going to look like next year, he didn't seem to talk much about Jalen Green.
Nope.
Notable for me.
Me too.
2, you talked about maybe other front offices are aware of the value of Jalen Green right now, which is why I think that Miles Turner trade we brought up last week is at the very least semi-realistic in a way where it's an older player that makes less money. Maybe the Bucks are looking at transitioning into a different type of team, and maybe they're willing to put the effort into seeing what Jalen Green is. And that's why that type of trade feels relatively realistic in a way that makes sense, right?
Boy, do I have some good math for you, Mike, on that front.
Okay. And then third,
you haven't. Yeah, I'll let
this
you make
is actually
point.
the part I want to spend time on.
Okay.
Devin Booker is a star, and we've spent some time talking about the malleability of him as a player and his ability to fit next to other stars. But what we've learned is that's not entirely true. Other stars do not necessarily fit around Devin Booker perfectly.
Yep.
Chris Paul did. We know Chris Paul did. Kevin Durant did not. Jalen Green, for however you want to call him, star or not, like he's cast in a star's role on this team. What he does is not a good fit next to Devin Booker. It's just not.
Agreed.
But what the question is, I think that we need to really examine, and briefly here and then maybe more throughout the offseason, Sam, what is that player? What is the skill set that you see as the proper fit next to Devin Booker? And I find it really interesting that you said Jalen Brunson. I really would not have expected that. And I think it's kind of fascinating for you to say. I love Jalen Brunson, by the way, but go ahead, David.
It's 2 different things, and I'm not going to, Brunson, I believe, again, for another reference to Max and I's pod many, many moons ago, I think sat in a tier of players in that draft that we kind of targeted as like guys to put next to Devin Booker. I'm certainly not against that type of player, and it's hard not to be when the most success that Devin Booker has had was with, a guy like Chris Paul next to him. But what I was more referencing with that point, Mike, is they've decided that Jalen Brunson is their star. He's not maybe a top 5 player in everyone's
I
books.
got you. Okay.
Maybe not, but they have built the perfect team over a number of years through trade, draft, etc., around Jalen Brunson. And we
they're
have
doing gutsy moves, too, to your point earlier about the Suns taking risks. Like, the Knicks took a lot of risks in some of these deals that they made. The Karl Anthony Towns trade was a huge risk.
Exactly. And that's why I use the Knicks as the example, because it's doable. They're proving you can at least make the finals without a top 5 player. Now, whether you can win them or not, we'll know in a couple of weeks' time. But we have not still to this day seen a full build around Devin Booker. The finals team was like, I guess, a close facsimile to what that looks like, but it was still a quote-unquote second star. Chris Paul was still making all-NBA teams next to Devin Booker during that time. Then they went and got Kevin Durant. Then they went and got Bradley Beal. And now we're back here with a team of role players around Devin Booker, but I don't think anyone would argue the right type of whole team roster around Devin Booker. And I just want to see it before it's too late and he's gone.
I need to ask an elephant in the room. I have all sorts of questions, and I'm just not going to be able to get to all of them. But elephant in the room question that I think needs to be asked, because we're almost an hour in, and well,
surprise,
I guess
surprise.
And we're barely 50, into the off-season questions.
We're 50 minutes in, and I think there are people who are probably wondering this about Devin Booker themselves. Is it still possible to build that level of team around Devin Booker, in the sense of Devin Booker is the guy who takes the most shots on the team, David? Because, you know, going way back to the beginning of the episode where Mike was like, well, were the playoffs fun? And, you know, now that I think about it a little bit more, my experience of watching the first round sweep against OKC really wasn't that fun, in particular as I was watching Devin Booker and becoming increasingly concerned with his kind of inability to just empty the clip, right? I think so much of that is scheme related. So much of that would be making his life easier by building a team around him and giving him the right tools. But exactly. I do still think it's a fair question to ask, though. You know, what is the type of player as a second star who can, like, when you even use the term second star, are we talking about a true second banana to Devin Booker? Are we talking about a guy who basically takes the same number of shots as Devin Booker, but kind of just has a different skill set in terms of how he scores or how he play makes? Or, you know, how should we be envisioning, you know, what building around Devin Booker in his 30s as a player who doesn't get to the rim a ton, but also, it, you know, just had a pretty weak showing as a three-point shooter too. Yeah. What does it look like now?
And yeah, I appreciate we're going long here. Again, surprise, surprise, and maybe jumping all over the place, but hopefully the listeners will just appreciate, you know, the totality of the off-season conversation that we're having here. But to answer your question, let's, you know, keep with the Knicks theme. Like, who's the Knicks' second best player in your mind, Sam?
I mean, yeah, it is Karl Anthony Towns still, and I understand that there are arguments that it could be other guys. And I think that's, you know, I don't think there needs to be a concrete answer. What I would say is something I know you guys have spoken about a lot, and with this theme of, like, can we please build the proper team around Devin Booker? And, you know, we'll even connect, say, Miles Turner to this conversation that was a throwaway from Mike earlier as well. You know, is that the second best player on the team, is a stretch big next to Devin Booker? We've barely seen it. When we have seen it, even in, you know, average NBA players, it's looked pretty fucking good. Mm-hmm. And then is the other strength, because it's not an outright second star and paid, you know, to the level of Devin Booker, as say like a Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal was, then is the next strength of the team that your third, fourth, fifth, and sixth best players are all, you know, very, very good for where they sit in the roster, and definitely where they're paid to sit in the roster as well. And I think that's where you get to the conversation around Dylan Brooks and, you know, his extension even this offseason is like, don't overpay him what he is now. Yeah. Pay him for what he'll be on that next great Suns team, and sit maybe third or fourth and be your Mikal Bridges or your Josh Hart type
OG Anunoby,
Anunoby. So, you know,
I mean, Miles Turner was just a top 3 or 4 player on a finals team. You know, we always want a distressed
asset, and, you know, as we'll get into when we look at the math, the perfect kind of you know, roster slot in terms of payment to Miles Turner.
We bring up the Knicks naturally because we always have this tendency to, like, chase the theme of what is the most, you know, recency bias, who's the most recent team to have done it. But just last year, the Pacers.
Yes.
I'm looking at the stats right now because I was like, oh, that's interesting. Let me look that up. Tyrese Halliburton.
Siakam's their second best player, who, by the way, would be a great fit next to Devin Booker.
But that's not my point. My point is, in the playoffs last year when the Pacers made the finals, Tyrese Halliburton, who everyone obviously knows is their best player, did not even average the most field goal attempts on that team. It was actually Pascal Siakam, the number 2 guy, who did. So yeah,
and to that was a very, I guess, detailed answer to your question, Sam. The broader answer, I would say, is like, I don't know the answer to the question, and as someone who's always tried to deal more in like trusting my eyes of what I've seen, I just want to see a better build over the next couple of years around Devin Booker before we categorically say, no, he can't be that guy. And if I think about the Thunder series, what was really easy for an already, historic defensive team is they could defend Devin Booker a certain way that made him look really, really bad. I'm not shying away from the fact that he looked horrible in that, series overall, but they could do that because of what we spoke about before.
There was no way to
two other guys on the team couldn't pass and were black holes themselves, that there was a lack of athleticism around him, that there was a lack of secondary creation around him unless Colin Gillespie was playing well. There just was so many flaws in that team, and I will, the caveat of injuries, etc. as well. Grayson Allen, for instance, being at least a decent guy that could provide some of those things, but just, not the ideal team around Devin Booker, because we've seen it. Sure, he was a little bit younger, he was playing next to Chris Paul, but when the build around, you had Cam Johnson, Mikhail, DeAndre rolling down the middle, a great secondary playmaker or primary playmaker, however you want to categorize him at that time of his career in Chris Paul, then Devin Booker looked, unbeatable at times and did empty the clip at great efficiency at times. So I just don't think we can take or cherry pick that OKC series as like, see, told you, Devin Booker's done. Like,
I think that's really important that you said that, because I've had more doubts than ever over the past few months. But it's, I want to be talked off that ledge a little bit. So I appreciate you saying that.
Do you want to do some math? We're an hour in. Should we?
Yeah, let's do it.
If people have lasted an hour, should we hit them with some math?
In the last hour, the Suns have paid $10 million to Bradley Beal while you were listening to this podcast.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So I heard you guys talking about that Gambo list, which I think is the perfect way to start here, because you guys, really alluded to it, and we can jump into that a little bit more in this pod. The math ain't mathin' on everything that he said. They want to keep Grayson. They want to keep Royce. They want to keep Highsmith. They want to be aggressive with the MLE, which, as you guys pointed out, is, just shy of $16 million. They want Fleming to play 25 minutes. So then how does Royce get the minutes if they're so hell-bent on keeping him around? They want to target teams for, maybe getting into the first round, but definitely jumping up in the second round. So if you pull all of that together and then look at the math, it just doesn't all make sense. One of those things has to be a lie from Gambo, or, I guess, not trying to play the Suns' hand. So that's where I just go and look at the cap sheet. Right now, both in guaranteed and non-guaranteed salary, we've got 11 rostered players totaling $185 million. As you guys noted, $16 million is the MLE. So we're about $15.3 million away from the tax. So you could go, all right, well, that's the MLE, but that's only 12 players, and not counting Colin Gillespie, Mark Williams, and Jordan Goodwin, who I would say are the kind of, 3 key free agents. There's some other guys that we won't get into. So you add them. And I just added Mark at his qualifying offer, which is just shy of $10 million. Gillespie at that rumored 4 for 40, I think.
Something like
maybe
that.
Dwayne threw out there.
Yeah, Dwayne.
So if you put that in a cap calculator I've got, you can probably start him at just shy of $9 million to get to that $40 million over 4 years. I put Goody in as $3 million. To be honest, it's kind of like throwing a dart at a wall with him. I think maybe they'd love to keep him around at slightly more than like his veteran minimum, but I don't think they're going to like overextend themselves to pay him $6, $7, $8 million a year.
It's weird. That's one of those cases where I haven't looked enough at the overall free agent market, because in theory, I would think Goody could be, the season he just had, like a tax-paying MLE candidate for someone. But I don't know if that's actually the case if you look at the other free agents who are available, because he's so small.
Neither do I. Yeah, and neither do I. And then you've got to roster a 15th guy most likely as well. So you get to, that's really conservative numbers on those three guys, especially Mark Williams. And you get to $209 million. So we're over the tax. We're over the tax by $8 million. So there goes your MLE. So Gambo's thing about being aggressive with that's gone. And your options are out. You've got your 15-man roster then at that point. So just to recap, $185 million with the current 11 guys, not counting free agents. Then we have the $15 million on the tax. Add those guys that we want. Let's say even Gillespie's the guy that everyone wants to keep. I think everyone could go, here or there on the others. You're still at the tax, so you still don't have that MLE keeping Gillespie around and other roster slots. So something's got to give, right? So here's what I looked at. Let's remove, just for shits and giggles, let's remove Jalen Green entirely. Let's remove Royce O'Neal entirely. Let's remove Mark Williams entirely. And then add that MLE. Probably a rookie with that second round pick. They've done it the last 2 years. You've got Oso's deal and then Fleming's deal. They've guaranteed those second round picks. So let's say they do that again. And then you probably have to add a veteran minimum to get that 15 roster spot as well. You are doing all of that $27.4 million under the tax with one roster spot left. What does Miles Turner make?
Whoa!
$26.5 million. So
is that a legal trade?
Sorry?
Would that 1-for-1 be a legal trade, or would there just have to be a 2-for-1 and someone gets waived?
It depends.
Yeah,
it depends on what they look like after a Giannis trade, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the point here is it's very easy for me to say, okay, we're removing Jalen Green, Royce O'Neal, Mark Williams, and adding an MLE player and Miles Turner. You still got to get deals done. I don't want to shy away from that. But to me, with what Gambo has said, what we think this team needs to look like next year, it's painting a picture of challenges for this offseason or goals, I think. And I think one of them is let Mark Williams go. We talked about the cost of that earlier. He played 60 games, started 55. Maybe don't let him go for nothing, but, would you take him on the qualifying offer of just shy of 10 million, or would you take a couple of seconds for him in a sign and trade now? Where do you guys sit on that?
I think I'd take the picks.
Yep.
What do you think, Sam? I mean, it's not bad. 10 million is not bad for what he provides. It's not like that's a bad deal or anything.
No, it's really not. I just, to both of your guys' point, I think both he and Oso are valuable in their own right. But the idea of guaranteeing, 40, 45, even 48 center minutes to the two of them again, and just getting no spacing out of that combo is tough. It's a tough pill to swallow.
I trust my eyes. I liked him at times, but I didn't love it overall in the I think broader the defense roster construction.
The defense is bad. That's how I would. It's not just mediocre. I think it's bad.
Should the Suns just sign Brook Lopez to that veteran minimum and have him chuck 10 threes a game?
Let's do that. I'm down for that.
As a budget version if they miss out on Miles Turner.
And that's why I wanted to look back at the cost. You got a placeholder out of him this year, so there's a certain cost associated to that you're happy to just kind of wash away, particularly if they got a couple of seconds in a sign and trade.
Which, by the way, to those listening, that's a realistic sign and trade.
Yes,
not
exactly.
these good players on other teams. 2 seconds. That's what you get in sign and trades. You're never getting anything great.
You're looking at him coming back on a really cheap deal with some protections, signing that qualifying offer, or letting him walk entirely, or a sign and trade that gets you just a couple of small assets back. But then you look at the overall in and out of that trade and you kind of go, well, we got 60 games out of him. Maybe that cost Liam McNeely this year, and the rest of it's just kind of a wash, and we're in a better position. We haven't, capped ourselves out by overpaying him, similar to that conversation we had earlier around Dylan Brooks, and we've got kind of some future flexibility. So, going back to that 27.4 mil, Turner we spoke about, but Jared Allen's 28. Who else have we got? We've got DeRozan at 25, Giddey at 25, Hunter at 24. Kuminga at 24, Keegan Murray at 24, Claxton at 23, Naz Reid at 23, Cam Johnson at 23, Miles Bridges at 23. And then under 20, you got Kuzma, Monk, PJ Washington, Lou Dort, Wendell Carter, Keldon Johnson. I think there's this real...
And to be clear, you've already factored in adding a $15 or $16 million MLE player into all this, right?
Correct.
So right.
Correct. Draymond Green at $27.6 million.
Oh, no.
That's a little scary, David.
Devin Vassell at $27 million. Yeah. So there's this real... If you look between kind of 28 and 19 million, there's this real chunk of players where you could kind of, for various reasons, talk yourselves into their current team being willing to let them go. For money reasons or, other guys coming through reasons. And yeah, I just think the math points towards if we take Gambo at face value and they're going to be aggressive with that MLE, it's going to be a challenge to get it done. But I do think that Jalen Green, Royce O'Neal, and Mark Williams are all on the chopping block here. And coming back will be an MLE type guy, a rookie, and potentially one of these guys in this group that I just mentioned.
Fascinating. Do you have an MLE guy have you looked at the free agents this year? Do any of them stand out to you as somebody who could be?
Funny you asked that question because I know Sam was doing some digging.
I think he's trying to throw 16 at Jock Landale for a return, if I had to guess.
Can I throw another curveball? Because I was really interested in Gambo's the Suns are going to be aggressive with the MLE. Because, what does that even mean? The MLE is what it is. It's, $15 million a year for 4 years. You can't be more aggressive than other teams with the MLE other than, offer up the full amount, whereas some teams might offer a fraction of it or whatever.
The full amount plus the full amount of years, right, too, is the
Correct.
other thing, yeah.
But something else changed in the last couple of years. Do you remember what that was with the MLE?
You can trade you can use it as cap space for trades, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, whoa, that's I forgot about that.
Yep.
Okay, going explain back how to that works.
Going back to the low assets but big dreams point that we're talking about with the Suns here. You can trade a player into your MLE as long as their first year salary fits into that, 15, I think it's just shy over $15 million this year, 15,048,000, I believe, is the first year of an MLE. And as long as their entire contract fits into the 4-year, $64.7 million. So, do you want some names?
Yes.
Beef Stew, $15 million. Obi Toppin, $15 million. Karis LeVert, 14.8. Don't like that one. Dennis Schroeder, don't like that one. Josh Green, 14.6. Bobby Portis, 14.5. Grant Williams, 14.2. Kispert, Risa Shea, dude fucking sucks, 13.3 million.
Yeah,
Dude really does fucking suck now.
It's finally true, yeah.
And then under 13, you got guys like Davion Mitchell, Okoro, Najee Marshall,
Denny Avdia,
Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins, which I just mentioned in, I think
they need to shed salary at some point.
Need to shed salary.
What about Dort?
Dort makes more.
He makes more. Right? He's like 18 million. I think you're right. Yeah.
Well, Dort is actually, he was on my other list of the under 20 mil that they might, try and make a trade. It wouldn't obviously be Jalen Green going to the Thunder and Dort coming back, but something in that space. Derek Jones Jr., Ty Jerome, Buddy Hield, Sam Hauser. I think there's a group here of, because you would be taking a guy in without sending anything back out. Yeah. There's a group where the other team might be motivated to just give you a player. And I would categorize that as aggressive. Mm-hmm. That is the Suns giving another team essentially a free hit by being able to offload a problem that they're dealing with. And the Suns taking back a player that they think they could actually use that's value at that contract versus, and I haven't looked at what Sam has looked at, but I don't have a great sense of the Suns using that in free agency versus maybe something like this and how those two things kind of look against each other.
Well, what I would wonder about that, right, is the difference between like them saying we're going to absorb Grant Williams, who's one type of player in the prime of his career that would probably, help them compete for a playoff spot next year, versus being like aggressive in another sense, which is like, let's go get Aaron Wiggins, a guy who doesn't play for the Thunder because they're so fucking good, but maybe could be an 18-point per game scorer and just doesn't have the opportunity to right now. Those would be very different approaches, and that's where I have no idea kind of what way the front office would be leaning.
Neither. I'm just trying to join the dots here, and I don't think I'm going to have 100% success rate with what I've thrown out here. Hopefully, I have more than 0%. But my off-season list as I go through it is, trade Jalen Green, let Royce O'Neal go. Well, you have to trade him, obviously, but take anything back for him to shed that $10 million, which I just think is too much for what he'll be doing on the roster next season.
That's another area where you've noticed the difference in the way Mike and I talk about Royce O'Neal. Probably.
I think we're on the same page about Royce O'Neal next year. But this
I just
last
think that's
season,
where
I think Royce was not as bad as people made him out to be. And
I probably sit more with Mike on that. But going into next year, particularly if we take the Rasheer Fleming comment from Gambo, or just the comments from the front office of how much they love him.
Yeah.
How is Royce O'Neal going to be value at the $10 million when you've got to play Dylan Brooks, you've got to play Grayson, according to Gambo, you've got to get bigger, and you've got to play Rasheer Fleming. I don't want $10 million and Gillespie, and potentially Goodwin.
Yeah,
I just don't want $10 million on this roster sitting at the end of the bench not playing. So if you can get seconds for him and someone will take him, then I think you've got to let him go. So the other things that I would throw into letting all of those guys go is, we touched on it earlier, don't overpay Dylan Brooks in an extension this offseason. And that's, the 5 or 6 predictions that I would throw at the wall and hope that I have 3 or 4 stick when we come back and talk before the start of the season, which I'd be more than happy to do with you guys.
That'd be great. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting to think about the math from that perspective, where you factor in, because look, I said it before, I'll say it again. All of what Gambo said to me points to Jalen Green not being part of the future of this team.
Agreed.
And I don't get that impression. I don't quite get the impression that even Jordan Ott was super in love with him. The fact that they continued to start Colin Gillespie after Jalen Green joined this team, that's all you need to know as far as what Jordan Ott values on this team and what he wants out of his guards. It's more like what Colin Gillespie brings. Now, whether or not Colin Gillespie can be a starter on a great team, another question entirely. But the fact that they want to keep Grayson Allen, they want to re-sign Colin Gillespie, and they consider Colin Gillespie to be one of their main priorities in the offseason, that's a lot of guards. We know what position Grayson is best at. It's not power forward, which he played at times for this team, and they need to move away from doing that. And maybe part of moving away from that is what Rasheer Fleming can bring.
So I have a question that I need to ask David, because it relates to what we started talking this podcast about, which is getting the second star, right?
Yeah.
If they didn't go the Miles Turner route, or someone in the kind of $20 to $25 million range, but they wanted to go and found that they were able to go somehow, the Zion, Ja Morant, Sabonis, Markkanen, I don't know, any other number of names route.
Yeah.
What would that it still necessitates Jalen Green being off the roster. Obviously, he's the most obvious candidate at $36 million. What else in terms of salary needs to leave somehow? Is that now Grayson Allen needs to go to? Is it I guess you could talk about is a Malawach involved in a deal like that? There's all sorts of things, but
yeah, and it puts that MLE at risk, or at least using it aggressively right up to the $15 million that it's worth, I would imagine. So, look, Zion's $42 million next season, so that's more than Jalen Green by about $6 million. So, yeah, you're getting into Malawach territory, or
Royce.
Yeah. Well, Royce is already off my team in this scenario.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
It's Grayson Allen out for a $10 million player instead, for instance. So I hope they don't go that angle, but I definitely agree with you, Sam, that it's an angle that they could go. And the ramifications are losing another player on top of all the players that I already listed off potentially being out the door, to bring a Zion or a Jar or someone are making Jalen Green money or more, which I think all of those guys you listed are probably more than Jalen Green. You're really losing another guy, whether it's a Grayson for a smaller salary player, not bringing an MLE in, or maybe like a Malawach, for instance.
And you know what? Yeah. I don't think that I used Malawach's name. I don't think he would have to go out, because what makes those guys, in my opinion, I mean, maybe for like a Markkanen or Sabonis, but for Zion and Ja specifically, what makes them distressed assets is the fact that they make more than Jalen Green. If they were making $28 or $32 million, I think it would be a much different story in terms of what those guys are able to command on the trade market. They're just such poison pill contracts at their current values. It's just hard to think about the fact over and over again that you listed a lot of good players at $25 million who the Suns could conceptually trade for and still have a full MLE and build a good team around Devin Booker. It's just hard not to think about how all of those $25 million players could be $45 million players in a different tier entirely were it not for Bradley Beal. It is so difficult to swallow.
Yeah, and I don't want to really... I think we might have even spoken about that last off-season pod or something that we did around when that decision was being made. And, I very much argued, and I guess it's a great way to link me back to my original point of how I look at last off-season here, Sam, is like, should they have just punted on last season to avoid some of these things that are going to continue to get in the way to build going forward? Or they would argue, I would say, that was the necessary evil to have a palate cleanse type year, get back to the playoffs, build a winning culture, and are they going to be able to build on top of that? That's the, $57 million question as I look at Devin Booker's salary here for next year on my cap sheet, that they made those decisions around, I guess, is they've taken those hurdles that they now have to jump to accelerate a winning culture versus, I think you could have potentially just eaten Bradley Beal's salary over the next couple of seasons, not brought in the type of guys that they did for Kevin Durant, and maybe sat further down the bottom for the next couple of years, but then really had things open up in the next couple of off seasons to make Devin Booker happy on the real back end of his contract versus the right here, right now, and that's the the fork in the road where they went one way, but you could definitely argue they could have gone another.
Yeah, and just to draw somewhat of a parallel to that, when James Jones was initially hired, he was clowned for the Josh Jackson and TJ Warren trades, which were thought of as a general manager giving away assets for nothing.
Yep.
And there was the intention of creating a culture and, by the way, opening up the cap space to sign Ricky Rubio at the time, which I think Ricky Rubio, for as much as that team, I think they overperformed for what they were, but as much as that team did not stick together for a long time, Ricky Rubio was instrumental, I think, in setting what the culture ended up being in Phoenix. And there is an argument to be made that those types of sacrifices are worth it sometimes, and there's times that maybe they're short-sighted. And, one of the conversations I wanted to have with Sam, which we can't get into now, was what's the difference in how this team approaches this offseason and maybe every offseason in building a team that needs to be good next year compared to a team that can be good for a long time in 5 years, for example. And how could that impact the decisions that they make going forward? And on that, actually, the number one of your list was Malawach, right?
Correct.
Now, and I know when we initially talked about that a year ago, I remember you said either using him in a trade or as a player. Let's focus on just as a player, because we have not really spent a lot of time talking about him before we go here.
Yeah.
What did you learn watching him this season, and how do you feel about his ceiling after what we've seen? And we know he's very young. I don't want anyone shouting at us, but we know that. So what do you think, David?
Yeah, I mean, the honest answer is I don't think I learnt a lot. And I probably learnt more watching his G League games than I did watching him in the NBA, just because of the sheer amount of minutes, even factoring in the level of competition. Probably the biggest thing that I learnt, which gave me confidence, was as a flaw, I think defensively, you're just going to be able to throw him out there and he is going to bring up the base level of your defense just on that alone. I just think the size, the agility, even how raw he is, I think he can get himself mostly in good spots to affect the defense positively overall. I'm not one to kind of nitpick the numbers that people have nitpicked in terms of like his defensive field goal percentage when he's out there and things like that, because I just think the exposure minutes wise, etc., and competition wise just isn't there yet.
I'll nitpick it. Don't worry.
But I think, I'm confident in that. But offensively, I have no fucking idea. They didn't use him enough. They didn't, both in like putting him on the court and then when he was actually on the court, they clearly weren't willing to kind of run things through him to learn more that way. I liked that he shot the ball. I thought he finished fairly well when they trusted him in the pick and roll, but again, I don't think I saw enough there to be confident either way. And that's the real kind of thing that I'll look back on with both him and Fleming to a lesser extent this year, is like, if all of a sudden they're giving Fleming 25 minutes next year and Malowacz is either spot starting or playing, regular proper backup minutes, like, why didn't we do that a year earlier? Like, I just feel like I'm going to regret that decision from the Suns, for instance, because it's going to come with its lumps. It's going to come with mistakes. And, are they going to be able to insulate that more next season versus this season? I just don't know. But, they got to play him next year, and that's probably going to come with some negatives at times.
Yeah. That's the thing about a Miles Turner trade too, right? Like, are they going to play him at the 4? How would that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again,
he rebounds like a 4.
He does, yeah.
Yeah, and the Suns have a history of having bad rebounders in those positions that we need good rebounders in. So
if you remember, by the way, when Brian Gregory was hired and when Jordan Ott was hired, they talked about playing double bigs, and then we never did it.
Exactly,
and
I think that's where I get back to that not necessarily being I guess a decisive answer that Jordan Ott doesn't want to play that way. I just think it's talent. I just think he didn't trust the talent to play that way. So, do they get more minutes out of Malowacz next year playing him with Oso, which, is definitely something we spoke about last offseason about me wanting to see. Are they more confident playing him with a Miles Turner, for instance?
Yeah, could Oso start with Miles Turner is an interesting question, yeah.
Exactly.
I think, go ahead, sorry.
No, keep going, Sam. Go.
No, I think Jordan Ott, just on his part, right, made the smart calculation that the way this team was going to win games was by winning the possession battle, and he didn't want a center out there who he thought was going to turn the ball over 4 or 5 times in 30 minutes. And I think, generally speaking, that's a very smart calculation on his part, very reasonable. To Malowacz's credit, his turnover rate kind of dropped considerably for a player with his lack of for lack of a better term, like basketball playing experience, right?
They did stop passing him the ball.
No, but well, and I, he probably had 3 assists total on the entire season in all of his playing time, but he wasn't out there committing 4 or 5 turnovers, on a per 100 basis when he was logging minutes in the second half of the season. And you could call it baby steps or whatever, but I think we saw, trinkets of enough there in Malowacz's game.
I agree. And, I watched a lot of his college tape. I watched a lot of his Basketball Africa tape. I've watched a lot of his G League games from last year. It's there at that level of competition. I've got no doubt about that. It's just, can he take the step up to the NBA, which is the biggest step that any pro basketballer is ever going to take. You can have all of that film in the lower levels that at least shows that it's there. and possible, but whether he can do it in the pros, we need to see him play in the pros. And that's kind of, something that I'm looking forward to this next season is, does he come back after an off season? I think strength was a big thing of Ott not wanting to play him. So can he get another off season of NBA strength conditioning into him where he just becomes more playable overall as a player, and then we can see that development, kind of take part. And again, probably why I'm not all that interested in Mark Williams, even on a placeholder qualifying offer or really cheap deal, because then the problems still exist. Because I don't want Oso to go anywhere. You look at his $2.3 million on the roster sheet next year and the asset that they use to get him. And, unless he's going out the door in some sort of big package trade to get a second star or something in, I want him on the roster and I want him playing if he's on the roster. So he was good. Really good.
People underrate him still, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he can't shoot free throws. And to be fair, that's
Go
pretty
make a free
embarrassing.
throw.
Yeah.
Go make a free throw.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's obviously a good player and doubly so when you consider for the asset cost, as David is pointing out.
And that's what the Suns are desperate for, cheap talent.
They have to nail.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You can easily pencil in Oso as a 15 to 20 minute per game player on any good team in the NBA. And so, of course, they need to keep him around.
Yeah. David, is there anything we did not talk about that you wanted to talk about now that we're, probably on your podcast feeds over 90 minutes at this point?
Well, we kind of danced around it a little bit, so I'll just ask you both the direct question.
Okay.
We've got Dylan Brooks on just shy of $21 million next year. His extension eligible as of July 6, I believe, and there's no deadline on that all the way through till the end of the year. They can give him the extension at any time. I would guess, just to keep Dylan happy and doing all the things that he does and acknowledge his role as a culture changer, that he probably wants an extension before the season start. He's eligible for 4 years, $125 million, which basically passes out as 28 in the first year, 30, 32, and then ends in the fourth year at 35. He is 30 right now. He'll be 31 in January of next season, I believe, and therefore he'll be 31/32 in the first year of that extension. So with all of that information now at your disposal, what's the contract?
I mean, for me,
you want to start?
My initial reaction, and I haven't really done a lot of thought on this, I'll be honest, was like 3 years is what you can probably give him. And ideally, you give him a raise because I do think he probably outperformed $21 million. So ideally, it would be something like flat 75 over 3. That feels right. I don't know that he would accept that, though. And I think that's kind of an interesting question. Maybe you push it to 80, and that feels like you're starting to get, maybe you're paying him too much.
Well, I do wonder
Sam?
if you could, some teams have done this before, you pay him more over, not more total, but a higher per year rate over 3 years to get him to accept the 3 years, versus giving him the fourth guaranteed year, which Dylan Brooks at age 35, I don't know about that one.
You can't do it.
I just don't know about that one.
Yeah.
I would propose a bonus structure of paying him $1 million per flagrant foul is probably how I would structure it. So
He's going to be a billionaire.
How many texts did he have this year? 17?
17, but really more. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think he should be getting around 20. If he had 20 real texts this year, or 21. But no, to give a serious answer, I'd probably do something similar to what you're saying, Mike. I know
you're being a little bit facetious there, but I'm genuinely curious whether they could add a bonus around technical fouls and whether it would be an unlikely or likely bonus based on how many he had last year.
Yeah,
because
if you $1 million more if you get less than 15 techs, basically.
Well, yeah, I want him to bring that, but I also want him to mature and toe the line a little bit. So
yeah, not in the last 5 minutes of a game.
Do you say we'll pay you $25 million a year flat? Because interestingly, I had 3 for 75, Mike, so we're on the same page there. But do you give him, $1 million bonus every season if he stays
extra
under
$3 million a year if he goes to therapy? That sort of thing.
The therapist has to sign off on the bonus.
So I think we're in the same ballpark. You know, I wrote down here the beauty of Dylan Brooks is he's that type of player where you want to look at his production versus his cost and go, for all his warts, we can accept that because we're only paying him $20 million a year, and he's probably producing, you know, particularly the first half of last season, he was probably producing at a, I don't know, $30 million.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And that's Dylan Brooks. That's what you want. You want to be like, we can put up with his bullshit. We can put up with him missing a couple of games from flagrants and technicals because we're only paying him $20 million a year. And, you know, I think he can't be, the comment I wrote here, and, you know, we'll use the Knicks kind of comparison again, is I don't think he can be a top 3 paid player on a championship team in the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
So if he's earning 25, you know, we take that Knicks.
Yeah, I got to look at their, I was just going to look at their payroll. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how their pay. I'm actually interested myself how that pay, but I would imagine that, you know, Mikhail, OG, you know, Towns would definitely be their clear second.
I think he's their most.
Player,
yeah,
right?
he is their. Okay, well, this is a unique team. Towns is their highest paid player. OG Anunoby is their second highest paid player.
Wow.
God,
And
they
then
really
Jalen
did
Brunson
gold
makes
with Brunson,
$34.9
didn't they?
million this year, and then Mikhail
And Mikhail
Bridges
makes 25.
at 25. Yeah, so that's like you'd be basically giving him Mikhail money, but Mikhail's extension kicks in next year, and he makes 33 starting next year.
Yeah, it's a really, you can't replicate that team with Jalen Brunson being the best player and the third highest.
Yeah, there's going to be an
but-
investigation into that one day. There's something fishy going on there.
But I think there is something there in that, like, you know, how those guys at the very top shake out, you know, whatever. It's going to have to be a little bit different with Devin Booker earning $57 million for us. But, you know, I think he has to be the, you know, the third or fourth highest paid, not second. So you've got to use that as a guide for what you're, you know, prepared to eat in an extension. Yeah, I agree. I think it has to be 3 years. Probably has to be a small raise on his next year's salary just so he feels like it's
worth it. He's not embarrassed to sign
something.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, another $75 million guaranteed or whatever, which pretty sure would take him to a pretty significant overall career.
Yeah,
earnings.
probably 150 plus million, maybe more. Yeah.
You know, and for the talent that he has, like, good for him. You know,
It's incredible.
So,
And that's
I
Canadian
think,
money. It goes further there.
imagine how far it would go in Australia when he, you know, maybe comes down and plays in the NBL
That's
for the
right,
last
that's right.
couple of seasons of his career.
Wins an
like
MVP,
many
yeah.
guys do. So yeah, that was that. I've been ticking things off as we've been going, guys. We have managed to stay around 90 minutes and ticked off all the things that I wanted to get off my chest. So
I think it was
appreciate you
largely
guys.
coherent.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Okay, honestly, these pods
People
are
will tell us if it wasn't.
these podcasts
Your
are so easy.
Your Discord, which I'm lucky enough to be a part of, is certainly going to tell us whether it was or not, Sam. I am 100% on that. So we will get that feedback one way or another. Hopefully, it's positive.
I do
or,
appreciate
not to threaten them. I'll never come back again if they trash me in the Discord.
I do appreciate how many times you said the word timeline at the very least. So that worked out.
I seem to throw that pun in there a couple of times every time I join you guys.
David, thank you so much for joining us as always. By the way, if you've never checked out the newsletter, you can find that online and even just read some of the stuff from that finals run. It's still a fun reread, even to look at some of that and see how the Suns were playing back then. I highly recommend it. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we go here, David?
It's still there. It sits in my bio still with an RIP next to it, just because, you know, I put a lot of hours into it. So if people do stumble on an old article here or there, it makes me feel good that it wasn't all a giant waste of time. You know, I'd point probably to, as you said, some of those things that talk about, you know, the best way that teams with Devin Booker on them can still play. There's a lot of relevant stuff
That's
there.
right. Yeah.
And I quote unquote predicted the last big Chris Paul contract, which was probably the absolute peak of the newsletter for those that were following it at that time. I kind of nailed that one with let's say a little bit of help from some friends along the way on that one.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you so much for joining us as always. By the way, a couple things for the podcast for those of you who stuck around this long. One, we're going to have a Patreon podcast coming out in the next few days. And then 2, I'm gone for a week after that. So then no podcast for like at least 8, 9, maybe 10 days or so. So no main feed episode next weekend. Sorry. Hopefully.
So you'll take this 100 minutes and you'll enjoy it.
Exactly.
Some people have asked why I can't just take the reins for a week, and it's because I don't understand how a computer works. I haven't figured out.
You haven't even figured out chairs yet, Sam.
I haven't figured out chairs. I've had the same rickety chair for 5 years. And people don't know this, but I'm actually recording this off of a 1997 IBM desktop.
That's right.
Is how we do all of our episodes.
He has to log in via MS-DOS. But yes, we will have a Patreon podcast that if it works out, I'm very much looking forward to. So if you want to join, patreon.com/thetimeline, as always. Join our Discord that David was talking about as well. We appreciate you all. We appreciate you, David. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back very soon.